So we got about 16 pages here that we've got to sort through to try and figure out what's going on. And since I've already kind of done that, I'm just going to show you some of these that are similar. All of these basically have the same thing going on. There's a common difference here. You've got from -1 to 2, there's a difference of 3, 3, and 3. So you're adding 3 here. Here from 3.5 to 5, this one looks a little bit more challenging, but you're increasing by 1.5, but you're adding it each time. Here you're actually not adding, well, you could say you're adding a -2, -2, -2, -2. And as we continue with that idea, from 2 to -1 is a -3, decreasing by 3 each time. So we keep looking at these types. 5 to 9 to 13 to 17, we're increasing by 4, so we're adding 4. And here you've got 13 down to 3, down to -7, you're decreasing by 10. So in each of these cases here, you're basically adding or subtracting. And those were, if I can go back, there's A, there's D, there's F, there's K, there's L, and there was O. Those were all the ones that kind of either added or subtract. We're going to call those arithmetic sequences. Okay, these you're either multiplying, well, technically you're multiplying, and in this case you can say you're adding all these. Technically you can say you're dividing these, but I'm going to suggest that we actually just keep the multiplier idea. Whatever we're starting with, and we'll get into that later, you're multiplying this by 2. So it's a -2 times 2 is -4, times 2 is -8, and so on. Here, this is the case where you're multiplying by something, but it's getting smaller, so you actually have to multiply by a fraction. Yes, you can say you're dividing by 4, but it's going to be in your best interest to say you're multiplying by 1/4. Anytime a 1 shows up in the multiplying one, the next one in line is going to be your multiplier. But you take this, you put the next one over the previous one. 4 over 16 reduces to 1/4. 1 over 4 reduces to 1/4. So the multiplier is whatever you get when you take one and divide it by the previous. Here, this one looks ugly at first, but if you go beyond that and just look at what you have, 5 times 2 is 10, times 2 is 20, and sure enough, you go back to here and multiply this by 2, the 2's are going to cancel, so it's a multiplier again. Times 1/3, cutting it in a third, cutting it in a third. 1 times 1/3 is 1/3. This one doesn't have fractions yet, but it's about to. 24 divided by 2 is 12, divided by 2 is 6. But really, what we want to kind of look at this is that we're multiplying by a half. Multiply by 1/2, by 1/2. This then would be 3 over 2, and the fraction would continue. From 3 to 6 to 12 to 24, you're multiplying by 2. Again, the ones that we just looked at there were B, G, H, I, I'm sorry, I was over here, or on the next one, J, and then N and P. So those are the ones that we just looked at there. Now the next couple, there's nothing really. Well, there's a couple quadratics, and we can tell that these guys are quadratics because of the kind of there's a stair-step approach kind of a thing, increasing by 2, then by 4, and then by 6, then by 9. And so on. That's kind of a stair-step approach with a multiplier of 2, and we can see that it's going to come back and do the same thing again if we go the other direction. So over here, this would be an 8. So an 8 down to 2, down to 0, back up to 2, back up to 8. You see the symmetry there. So these are quadratic, and I think, well, this is I and M. I would go the last two. I would kind of throw them into an other category. There's not as much of a pattern here. We can look at this one here. This is these are perfect squares. So if you square 1, you get 1. You square 2, you get 4. You square 3, you get 9. You square 4, you get 16. You could also say it's increasing by 3, then by 5, then by 7. And this one here, this one's really weird. This one has no other pattern other than, it's called the Fibonacci Sequence, which means it's if you add 2 consecutive numbers together, you'll get the next. So 1 plus 2 is 3, and 2 plus 3 is 5, and 3 plus 5 is 8, and 5 plus 8 is 13, and so on. So those other categories, those are just other, and that's how we'll leave it.